What I want to do in this series of talks examining the table is briefly speak about things that are in this book which I wrote. And then, as Sue said, we're going to have conversations. So, Miss Maggie and Bob today, Bishop Bev will be here next week. Father Peter McGrail from Hope University will be here the week after. And then the week after that, I can't remember. After that, it is Richard Pierce, Father Richard, who is one of our senior team in the diocese, and Ellen Loudon will top the bill on the 10th of April. The book is not, reading the book is not essential to the business of coming tonight. So if you've not read it or even bought it, there is no problem. As I've said to very many people, if you do want to buy one, unsigned copies are worth more. And that's going to be difficult here because I've signed them all. So you'll have to work hard to find one. A year ago now, I was in the United States in the process of writing and indeed completing this piece. I went to America to do it because I was given some study leave by the church. And I had the chance to go somewhere, and 15 years ago, long before I ever thought that I would be a bishop, let alone bishop here, I had a study leave all teed up ready to go, which would have involved going to the United States and taking stock of what the church over there was doing. So when the chance came for me to have this study leave, it was to the United States that I went, and I had 2 weeks in San Francisco, in a theological college there, the Church Divinity School of the Pacific. And I had 2 weeks in New York with Bishop Michael Curry and his team in 2nd Avenue, number 815 2nd Avenue, the headquarters of the Episcopal Church. And I had a month in Virginia, at Virginia Theological Seminary, just south of Washington, D.C. And I prayed and thought and discerned what it was that I was talking about when in my inaugural sermon I took this image of a table. There's all kinds of images of the church. You can say that the church is a body. You can say that the church is the bride of Christ. You can say that the church is a community of truth. You can say, as the Roman Catholics do, that the church is the Easter people. You can say, as we do, that the church is a pilgrim people. But as I prayed and wondered what the church in Liverpool might be and what I might be as its bishop, before I preached that sermon from which Sue quoted earlier, it came to me that the church could be seen as a group of friends gathered round a table. And so I had the idea of the poor carpenter Jesus, who made a table at which we could all sit. And that was the sermon I preached, and many of you here would have heard me preach it. And unfolding and unpacking that image is what I try to do in my study leave and in the book. And I arrived at 4 things that were not in the sermon and were not in my mind until I had the study leave. And the next 4 of our 5 sessions will touch on each one of those. So I said that what matters in the Christian life is that we meet at the table, that we drink from the fountain, that is the fountain of life, the fountain of Scripture, the fountain of the creeds that we're given, the fountain of the liturgy that we pray. We meet at the table, we drink from the fountain, we watch in the moment. And that's when Father Richard comes, who's a teacher of Christian mindfulness, and we're going to talk in that particular one, the 3rd of these, about what it is to live in what I call real time. Because God is always present. But as St. Augustine said, the problem sometimes is God is always present, but we're not. We live in the future or the past, or we're distracted. We're the ones who need to come and meet God, because God is always here. So watch in the moment. And then the 4th one was to stretch for the kingdom. And in the inaugural sermon, and ever since, as colleagues from the diocese know only too well, I never speak without saying, in this diocese of Liverpool, we're called forward to ask God, we're asking God for a bigger church to make a bigger difference. More people knowing Jesus, more justice in the world. And that flowed out of this image that we sit at a table with Jesus beside us. And at that point in the series, I'll talk about what it means that Jesus is beside us and not opposite us. He sits beside us. And many of the teachers of prayer have said, God is closer to us than we even are to ourselves. And I try to explore what that means. He sits beside us, but in the book I said that we sit at the table facing other people, as I'm facing you now. I said it's a square table, not a round table, because it's a table for conversation. Sometimes I said it's a table for thumping. Sue prayed earlier for the Houses of Parliament as this evening they vote on no-deal Brexit. And you know that the way that is set up there in Parliament is for contention, is for people to face each other. There is no table there in Parliament, but there are these strips of carpet, as you'll know if you ever went as a school child, which you're not supposed to walk across, and they are 2 swords lengths apart, so you can't run through the person you're disagreeing with. The table of Jesus Christ is a square table. It's a table for thumping, but it's also a table for signing treaties. It's a table for peace. Some people here I can see whose life is given to reconciliation, to mediation, to bringing people together. So this image has all these truths inside it. And those are the 4 themes of the next 4. But this initial one, I wanted to talk about the first ideas that I had in the writing of this book after I talked about the image that I preached about. And in it I talk about the kind of faith that I believe is compelling. The kind of thing that God has done, which draws us to God's self in a way that is irresistibly beautiful. And I talk about the Christian journey as having been entered through a narrow place, as the Bible says it is. That is to say, to know Jesus Christ. But having known Jesus, you're then led out into a broad place. This is the largest Anglican church in the world. And so as you look around, you can see a broad place. And I spoke about the Christian faith and about my understanding of it as being light and tolerant, as being spacious and open. And it's in that context that I fell in love with Jesus. He introduced me to a world which was spacious and open, which was tolerant and gentle, which was light, not dark. And I say it in this book that so often in the church we seem to have been turning our back on that way of being, turning our way towards something which is much more harsh. And when Father Peter McGrail is here, I will talk about the Bible and the way in which sometimes the Bible is used as a weapon rather than a thing that brings light. And I say this, and I've believed this for many years before ever I came to him. Jesus, in his lifetime, was a scandal. The word scandalon in Greek means a stumbling block. People tripped up over Jesus. And if you read the Gospels, you find that things people tripped up over when it came to Jesus didn't have a great deal to do with his teaching, or much to do with the way that he spoke or the healings that he did. The thing that made Jesus such a difficult person in the eyes of the religious people of his day was the fact that he sat down at a table with the wrong sort of people. He was constantly being picked up by the religious people of the time for sitting down with the wrong sort of people. In the book I say sometimes he was sitting at the wrong table. For example, the table of the crooked tax collector Zacchaeus. Sometimes he was at the right table, but in the wrong company. So he went, the Bible tells us, to the house of Simon the Pharisee, a good Jew who was living the pure life. And so his table was a clean table, but he sat there, Jesus, and suddenly lots of dirty people were coming to be with him there. And sometimes he was at the right table, another Pharisee not named, but doing the wrong thing. Not washing before eating. Not being polite to his host, but describing his host as a whitened sepulchre, painted grave. Jesus at table was quite a handful. And the American theologian John Dominic Crossan says that the main thing about Jesus as a scandal, the thing that led Jesus to the cross, was the fact that he ate in the wrong company. And I want you to think about that, to ask the question, if Jesus is always sitting with the wrong company, what are you doing with him? And the answer, of course, is that you're the wrong company, and so am I. We have not earned our place at the table of God. It's a matter of grace. That's why the Christian faith is light and spacious and open and tolerant. Because Jesus sits beside us, despite the fact that we don't deserve it. And then, of course, he calls us to sit beside others who don't deserve it. And it was a matter of great, it is a matter of great pride to me that the Micah project, what used to be the Hope Plus food bank, runs from, among other places, this cathedral church, providing food for people who need food, laying the table even more widely in the name of Jesus, who made himself so unpopular by laying that table widely. There's a church in San Francisco which is an inspiration to me and has been for many years. It's the Church of St. Gregory of Nyssa in Potrero Hill, San Francisco. You open the door to go into that church, and you don't find what you normally find in a church beside the door. In most churches beside the door, you find besides people's table in a load of books and leaflets, but you also find the font. Because for most people it is the font that is the introduction. Because it is through baptism that we're introduced into the family. But in that church, St. Gregory of Nyssa, you open the door and the first thing you see is the altar, the table. And then far off in the distance, through the church and into a little garden beyond the church, a private garden, you'll see a fountain of water with a bowl, and that's where they baptize people. The first thing you see is the table. And on the table, two things are written, and I'm just going to quote these from the book. I was told about these, I was shown these two things by the man who founded St. Gregory of Nyssa, a man called Rick Fabian, who gave me lunch in San Francisco and told me this. The first is that in Greek, I'm not going to quote the Greek as Greek, but in Greek there's a line from the New Testament, which when you translate it, it says, this guy welcomes sinners and eats with them. This guy. The Greek word is hutos, and that means something derogatory, that fella. And that's what the Bible says. This guy welcomes sinners and eats with them. And round on the other side of the table, there are these words from one of the saints of the East, St. Isaac, who said this: did not the Lord share the table of tax collectors and harlots? So then, you do not distinguish between the worthy and the unworthy. All must be equal in your eyes to love and to serve. Those things are written on that table. And it's a lovely church, and they worship God beautifully there. But if you go into that church, even if you're not baptized, you can receive communion. And And I talk about that in an appendix to the book, which I won't be talking about anywhere else, so I thought I'd get it in here. I was provoked by that, by the fact that this was a church that offered communion to anybody who came. I was provoked by it for two reasons. The first is that church, they pray a prayer. It's the first thing they say every week, and I'm going to share with you in a minute. And the second is that they gave communion once to a woman who came into the church building broken and lost. The prayer, they say, they come in together, the ministers, as we do in our church, and they walk into the midst of the people as I'm in the midst with you. And this is the prayer they say: "Blessed be God the Word, who came to his own, and his own received him not. For in this way God sanctifies the stranger." Blessed be God the Word, who came to his own, and his own received him not. For in this way God sanctifies the stranger. And then speaking to God, "O God, show us your presence in all we meet today, that we may welcome them and you." Blessed be God the Word, who came to his own, and his own received him not. For in this way God sanctifies the stranger. O God, show us your presence in all we meet today, that we may welcome them and you. I heard them say that. I didn't know that before I went there. And I was thunderstruck by the openness that it showed. The woman who went there, an atheist, the daughter of Marxist parents, a ferocious activist for justice, not a Christian, was a woman called Sarah Miles. Sarah has written a book, and if you've only got a limited amount of money, I would suggest that you buy her book, not mine. The book is called "Take This Bread." And I mention this in the book, I won't read it aloud, so I may get the quote wrong, but Sarah went into that church, St. Gregory of Nyssa. She opened the door and there was the table. And they were having communion. And they share communion around in a rather a melee sort of scrum. And the bread they share is real bread, it's quite sweet, so they bake it themselves. And Sarah in the book, Take This Bread, says, "They drew me in, and they placed in my hand a piece of bread. And when I ate the bread," she says, "the most extraordinary thing happened to me. Jesus happened to me." But she became, in my judgment, through her books, of which there are two, Take This Bread and Jesus Freak, she became the equivalent in our generation of Thomas Merton in his, the most significant spiritual writer in the Christian West. And she speaks about feeding the poor, which is what she gave her life then to do from that church, one of the very first food banks ever set up many years ago. She's retired now. She comes to England now and again, and if she comes anywhere near you, please make it your business to see her. "Someone placed in my hand a piece of bread, and the most extraordinary thing happened to me. Jesus happened to me." I share that with you because that is the driving impulse of the book, that we might be a table which is open. The phrase "open table" means something different in America from what it means here in England. It means that communion is offered to anyone. Here, the Open Table Network is a network of churches, but flowing out from Liverpool, which opens itself to people on the edge of things. I've shared with you what comes at the beginning of my book and what comes at the very end, because we'll be systematic in the next 4 sessions. But I believe I've shared with you the heart of what I think about God, who comes to anyone without condition and who happens to them. And as a result of that extraordinary thing happening to them, they become transformed. And I think that is a gift that we in the church need to be giving this nation tonight at this time of crisis over Brexit, at any time when we're tempted to put up walls and to say we don't want you to come here unless you are worthy, we have a more radical thing to say to people. God, show us your image in all we meet today, that we may welcome them and you. I'm going to finish. Sue's looking at her watch, but I'll come back to her. Cheers. I'm just going to finish with some words from James Naylor. James Naylor was a Quaker. He had a mental illness. He was a very unstable man. He was a very sad man. He died in pain. But as he died, he said this, the testimony of James Naylor, and I'll finish with this, and then these two can put me straight. This is what he said, and I want you to imagine him saying this with difficulty, because he had a tongue, and his tongue was bored through with a hot iron, because he was seen as a heretic, and in those days that's what they did to people who didn't fit the family. And on his forehead there was a beam burned with an iron, which meant blasphemer, because he was a Quaker and did not believe that he should be baptized or say the creeds. And this is what he said as he died. There is a spirit which I feel, that delights to do no evil, nor to revenge any wrong, but delights to endure all things in hope to enjoy its own in the end. Its hope is to outlive all wrath and contention, and to weary out all exaltation and cruelty. It sees to the end of all temptations, and it bears no evil in itself, and it conceives no evil in thought to any other. If it's betrayed, it bears it, for its ground and spring is the mercy and forgiveness of God. And he goes on, and then he says, I found it alone, being forsaken. I have fellowship with them who lived in dens and desolate places of the earth, who through death obtained the resurrection and eternal holy life. He said that and then he died. And in the book I say, when I die, please God, I can feel a spirit like that. And if ever any of us are in contention, and none of us will have our tongues burned through and branded with the mark of a blasphemer, but if that were ever to happen to me, if I could be so gentle as to say that there's a spirit I feel that doesn't do evil, then I would feel that I had met Christ. And I commend Naylor to you because he was outside the family, and the story of St. Gregory because it's outside the family, and the story of the table because there we sit, open to all. And that's the vision that compels me. Light, spacious, open and tolerant.